My name is Danielle, and I'm 31 years old. On what should have been the happiest day of my life, my father refused to walk me down the aisle. Not because he was sick, not because he couldn't make it, but because my sister Jessica, who has hated me since childhood, decided to throw a charity gala on the same exact day as my wedding, and he chose to go to her event instead. But what neither of them expected was who would take his place, and what that person would reveal. Something that would finally expose everything they had tried to bury for years. I'm telling this story now because for most of my life I thought I was crazy. I thought maybe I was the problem, that I wasn't lovable enough, patient enough, forgiving enough. But now looking back, I realize I wasn't the problem. I was just the easiest to blame. Growing up in Denver, Colorado, our family looked perfect from the outside. My father was a successful attorney known for his charm and commanding presence. My sister Jessica, 4 years older, was always presented as the shining star valedictorian captain of the cheerleading squad prom queen. And I was Danielle. Quiet, bookish, forgettable. My mother, Rebecca, was the only buffer between me and the storm that was Jessica. She saw through the lies, the manipulation, the way Jessica would subtly twist every situation to make me look bad. But my mother passed away from breast cancer when I was just 10 years old. After that, it was like all the air got sucked out of the house. My father was devastated, but instead of grieving with us, he threw himself into work and left us in the hands of the eldest daughter, Jessica. I was just a kid, still wetting the bed some nights from the nightmares. And suddenly, Jessica became my guardian, my judge, my executioner. At first, it was little things, locking me out of the house when she went to parties, throwing away the birthday cards my classmates gave me. But by the time I was 15, it escalated. One night, she shoved me during an argument over laundry. I fell and fractured my wrist. When I told my dad what happened, Jessica cried and said I slipped. He believed her. I remember sitting there cast on my arm, listening to him say, "Don't create drama, Danielle. We need peace in this house." That moment stayed with me. It was the beginning of a long journey of being invisible. Every time Jessica did something cruel, I was told to be the bigger person. When I got accepted into college, Jessica told my father I was throwing away my future by majoring in journalism. He responded by cutting off my tuition help and telling me to learn the value of independence. I worked 2 jobs, carried full credit hours, and somehow still graduated top of my class. He didn't attend the ceremony. Jessica said he had a client emergency. Years later, I found out he was at her yoga retreat in Aspen that weekend. I tried to let go, tried to live my life and move forward. But when I got engaged to Thomas, a gentle, quiet man who treated me with more kindness than my family ever did, I thought maybe this is the moment. Maybe this is where my father redeems himself. Maybe walking me down the aisle would be his way of finally showing up. At first, he sounded surprised but pleased. "It's time we start over," he said. I believed him, until Jessica announced she was throwing a massive charity gala on the exact same day, and my father, without blinking, said, "I'm sorry, Danielle. Jessica's event is important. She needs me." But the story doesn't end there, because someone else stepped in, someone unexpected. And when the truth finally came out about Jessica, about my father, about what they had both been hiding for years, it blew everything wide open. What happened next, no one saw coming. After my father chose Jessica's gala over my wedding, I sat on the floor of my kitchen, clutching the phone in my hand, unable to move. It wasn't just the rejection that hurt, it was the years behind it. The pattern, the history, the confirmation that no matter what I did, I would never be enough for him. Jessica had always won, not because she was kinder, not because she was more deserving, but because she was louder, manipulative, strategic. And I had always been the quiet one, the girl in the background, the one who didn't scream for attention but hoped love might arrive anyway. After our mom died, I truly believe Jessica saw it as her opportunity to take control of the household and of my father. She became the emotional gatekeeper. If he wanted peace, he had to go through her. She made herself indispensable. She cooked, cleaned, smiled at him when he got home, and slowly rewrote the family dynamic to center around her. I became the problem child not because I did anything wrong, but because I didn't fit into the narrative she wanted to tell. At 17, I remember begging him to believe me when Jessica had taken my debit card and spent over $200 on makeup. She told him I was lying to cover up my own spending habits. He looked at me and said, "I'm disappointed, Danielle." And that was it. No discussion, no investigation, just a verdict. The stakes weren't just about a wedding, they were about identity, about being gaslit for over a decade until I questioned my own memory, about losing my mother and having no one left who fought for me, about being the target of psychological warfare dressed in pearls and a perfect smile. By the time I turned 21, I had moved out and cut contact for a while. I built a fragile life of my own, cheap apartment ramen dinners, freelance writing gigs. That was when I met Thomas. He was photographing a local magazine event I was covering. He had the softest voice and the kindest eyes. Our first conversation was about Dostoevsky and cinnamon rolls. He said I was the most observant person he had ever met. I said he was the first man who didn't look through me. We dated for 4 years before he proposed during a hike at Garden of the Gods, kneeling awkwardly in the dirt, holding a ring he'd spent 3 months saving for. I cried not because of the ring, but because of what it meant. Stability, love, a life not defined by fear. When we started planning the wedding, Thomas asked gently about my father. "Do you want to invite him?" I wasn't sure. I hadn't seen him in nearly 2 years, but part of me wanted closure. Wanted to believe that maybe with the right moment he might step up. I called him. We talked for 20 minutes. He said he was proud of me, that maybe it was time to start fresh. I believed him. I sent him a handwritten note asking him to walk me down the aisle. I told him I still loved him, that this moment would mean everything. A week later, he texted back. I'd be honored, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had a father again. But the stakes weren't just about showing up. They were about what happens when the person who hurt you most has one last chance to make it right, and instead chooses to do more damage. Because when Jessica scheduled that charity gala and my father chose to speak at her event, instead of escorting me into my future, it wasn't just a scheduling conflict. It was a message, loud and clear. You are still the expendable daughter. You are still second place. And I'm still choosing her. But what he didn't know was that someone else had been watching all along. Someone who had known my mother. Someone who had seen the truth beneath the performances. And that person was about to change everything. Jessica and I were never close, not even as children. She didn't like to share. Not toys, not space, not attention. She saw me as competition from the moment I was born. I was the baby that stole our mother's time, the one who cried too much, who needed too much. When we were kids, she'd steal my dolls and cut their hair, then say I did it. She'd whisper things to me like Mom and Dad didn't really want you, or you ruined everything when you were born. I didn't know how to explain it to anyone. It always sounded petty, and when I tried, she'd switch into angel mode. Sweet smile, innocent tone. Danielle's just having a hard time adjusting, and my parents believed her. Our mother, to her credit, tried. She saw some of it. She'd talk to me alone, give me quiet reassurances. But cancer took her quickly, and once she was gone, Jessica filled the vacuum like she'd been waiting her entire life. I was 10. Jessica was 14. She took over the house. Not officially, of course, but in every meaningful way. She managed the grocery lists. She answered the home phone. She filtered all communication to our father, deciding what he should or shouldn't hear. If I cried at night, she'd bang on the wall and scream for me to shut up. If I left dishes in the sink, she'd throw them in my room. Once, when I was 12, I accidentally spilled juice on her math textbook. She cornered me in the laundry room and slapped me. It was the only time she hit me in the face, but I still remember the sound. I didn't tell anyone. What was the point? Dad was working nonstop by then. He'd leave at 6 a.m. and come back around 9. We hardly saw him. When we did, he was exhausted. Jessica made sure she was always the helpful daughter, the golden one. I became the afterthought. The girl who acted out, who needed therapy, who was so sensitive all the time. That narrative followed me. It shaped the way I saw myself. Even in college, when I succeeded, I felt like a fraud. Jessica used every opportunity to frame me as unstable. She told family friends I had anger issues. She told my dad I was seeing some sketchy guy when I first dated Thomas. She even said I had a drinking problem based entirely on one blurry photo from a friend's birthday. My father believed every word, or maybe more accurately, he didn't want to believe otherwise. It was easier for him to see Jessica as the perfect daughter, the one who stayed, who helped, who cared. He once told me Jessica's had her struggles, but she's always been reliable. I wanted to scream, reliable. She once posted private journal entries of mine online as a joke. She impersonated me in high school to get out of detention. She destroyed every friendship I had at home by spreading rumors, lies, manipulation. But she smiled while doing it, always smiling. That was her secret weapon. And when social media took off, she found her stage: Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. She became this polished brand: Jessica Rose, wellness warrior, community leader, kindness advocate. It made me sick. The same person who used to tell me I was worthless was now posting self-love reels and hosting mental health fundraisers. She built a platform on lies. I stayed silent. I didn't want drama. I had my life, my career, my relationship, but I never forgot. And when I saw the invite for her Earth Gala pop up online same day as my wedding, something snapped, because it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't poor timing. Jessica was telling me again that I didn't matter, that my day was hers to ruin, that if I dared to shine, she would block the light. And once again, my father went along with it. No questions. No resistance. Just another year, another betrayal. But this time, I wasn't alone. This time someone else saw what was happening. Someone who had known my mother before she died. Someone who had seen Jessica without the mask. And that person was ready to talk, ready to help, ready to expose everything. The moment I saw the gala post, my stomach twisted. It wasn't even subtle. June 18th, Earth Gala 2024. Hosted by Jessica Rose, benefiting Green Future Foundation. She had included a full promo video with interviews, graphics, and a trailer-level soundtrack. The date was in bold, as if to taunt me. The exact same day as my wedding, which she had known about for months. I called her not to fight, but to clarify. Maybe it was a mistake, maybe her team had scheduled it without realizing. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I just saw your Earth Gala announcement. You do know that's my wedding day, right?" Her silence lasted 3 full seconds. Then came the sugary voice I knew too well. "Oh my gosh, Danny, are you serious? I totally forgot. I mean, I have so much going on right now. It's a fundraiser. You know how hard it is to coordinate these things." I didn't respond. My heart was pounding. Anyway, she continued, "My event is at 11 in the morning. Your ceremony's not until 4, right? So Dad can totally do both. It'll be fine." "Jessica," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The venues are 2 hours apart. And he's supposed to be there for pre-ceremony photos, not just the aisle." "Well," she said, the cheer fading, "maybe don't make this about you, Danielle. You're not the only one with important things happening." That's when I knew this was intentional. This was a move. A power play. A declaration that she still held the center of our father's world. I hung up and called my dad immediately. "Did you know Jessica scheduled her gala on my wedding day?" "Yes," he said calmly. "She told me last week. It's unfortunate, but she's been working really hard on this." "You said you'd walk me down the aisle," I reminded him, my voice shaking. "I will," he said. "I'll go to the gala in the morning and drive straight to the venue after. I've mapped it out. I can make it by 3:45. "That's cutting it close," I said. "And what if there's traffic? What if something runs late, Danielle?" He sighed. "Let's not turn this into drama. You've always been emotional." Just trust me. Emotional. That word, the way he weaponized it, like every fear I'd ever expressed was just noise. I didn't argue further. I knew it was pointless. But over the next few weeks, things started unraveling. During a planning call, I mentioned a delay in the guest arrival shuttle, and he immediately asked, "So can we move the ceremony to 5? That would give me more buffer time." Later, he emailed to ask if he really needed to be in the pre-wedding photos. "We could always do those with Thomas's family," he wrote. It was slipping. The commitment was evaporating. Jessica was winning again. I confided in Thomas. "I feel like I'm 10 years old again," I said. "Like I'm watching them cut me out of my own story, and there's nothing I can do." He wrapped his arms around me and said quietly, "Then we rewrite the ending." That was when Alex reappeared. I hadn't seen him in years. He was my mother's closest friend, a former colleague at the nonprofit where she worked before she died. He messaged me after seeing a post about my engagement and asked if we could catch up. When we met for coffee, he looked older but sharp, the same thoughtful eyes. We talked for over 2 hours. When I told him what was happening, his expression darkened. "I need to tell you something," he said, reaching into his briefcase. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were copies of financial documents, screenshots, and correspondence. "I've been working with a small investigative group," he explained. "Jessica's foundation is under quiet scrutiny. There are discrepancies. Large donations going into personal accounts. Inflated marketing invoices paid to shell companies. It's not public yet, but it's coming." I stared at the papers, my heart racing. "And your father?" "At best, he's complicit. At worst, he's involved." "Why are you telling me this now?" I whispered. "Because," he said gently, "your mother asked me to protect you, and I failed. But I'm not going to let that happen again." Everything was changing. The pieces were moving. Jessica wasn't just sabotaging a wedding, she was protecting a crumbling empire, and my father was helping her. But now I had someone in my corner, and the truth, it was finally rising. 2 weeks before the wedding, I got the call that shattered whatever illusion I had left. It was a Tuesday evening. I was reviewing seating charts in our apartment when my phone rang. My father. I hesitated before answering. "Hi, Dad." His voice was unusually formal. "Danielle. I need to talk to you about June 18th. I already knew. I could feel it in my chest before he said another word. "I've been thinking about the logistics, and I just don't think I can make it to the ceremony on time." Silence. "Jessica's event requires me to be there from start to finish. She's relying on me to deliver the keynote and introduce the donors. It's a major step in her career." And walking me down the aisle, I asked quietly. "It's not about that," he said quickly. "It's just timing, you understand." "No," I said, "I don't. Danielle, don't make this bigger than it is. It's just one part of the day. You'll still have your moment. Maybe someone else can walk you, a friend, or Thomas's dad. It's not the end of the world. To you, maybe," I said, barely holding myself together, "but it is to me." We ended the call with no resolution. I sat there, stunned, tears streaming down my face, feeling 12 years old again. Abandoned, replaceable. Thomas found me an hour later, still sitting on the floor. He pulled me into his arms and didn't ask any questions. That night, we lay in bed and he whispered, "We can postpone, or elope, whatever you need." But something had changed inside me. Something hardened. "No," I said. "This wedding will happen, on our terms, with or without them." I told Alex everything. He listened without interrupting, then nodded. "Good," he said. "Let's take back your story." The next day, he sent me a message. "Would it be okay if I stood in for your father?" I stared at the screen, emotions flooding me. Relief, grief, hope. I replied I'd be honored. He sent back one word. "Then let's make it beautiful." Over the next several days, things shifted. Quietly but decisively, we adjusted the timeline. We updated the photography plan. My bridesmaids' college friends and colleagues rallied around me with a loyalty I didn't expect. They helped me assemble welcome bags, reviewed the seating chart 100 times, and filled the hotel suite with so much laughter it made me forget for a moment what was missing. My cousin Leah, the only extended family member who ever really believed me, messaged to say she'd skipped Jessica's gala entirely. "I'm here for you," she wrote. "Always." Meanwhile, Jessica's social media exploded with posts about the upcoming event. Behind the curated captions and filtered photos, I saw the desperation, the overproduction, the frantic energy of someone trying to hold a lie together. She posted an inspirational quote about forgiveness, thinly veiled shade toward me. I didn't engage, but Alex was working behind the scenes. The investigative team had quietly submitted the first report to federal regulators. No arrests, no headlines, but the machine was in motion. One night, 5 days before the wedding, I found an old photo of my mother and me. I was 5 missing teeth sitting in her lap. She had her arms wrapped around me, smiling so warmly it hurt. I clutched the photo, whispering, "I wish you were here." And maybe she was. In Alex's voice, in Thomas's patience, in every person who stayed when they didn't have to. The truth was close now. I could feel it. Jessica thought she had won. My father thought he had minimized the damage. But what neither of them knew was that this wedding wasn't just about flowers and rings. It was the end of their control. The last time they would get to rewrite my story. And when the moment came when the truth stepped into the light, it would be irreversible. 3 days before the wedding, I received a package at my apartment with no return address. Inside was a thick envelope labeled confidential and a typed note. "Thought you should have this. Use it however you see fit. A friend." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. It was a compiled dossier, neatly organized with timestamps, financial summaries, and screenshots. Everything Alex had shown me, and more. Emails between Jessica and fake vendors. A wire transfer to a luxury hotel in Italy marked as environmental research. Internal memos from her so-called foundation discussing donor incentives in language that reeked of fraud. There was no doubt. This was enough to trigger a full-blown investigation. I called Alex. "I got your package. He didn't deny it. I thought you deserved to know the full scope, and I wanted you to have the power. Not me." "What do I do with this?" I asked. "That's up to you," he said. "But if you want my advice, wait. Let her make her final move. Then strike when it matters most." His words stayed with me. This wasn't about revenge. It was about release, about stopping the cycle. The next day, Thomas's parents arrived in town. His mother, Grace, hugged me so tightly I nearly cried. "Whatever you need, we're here," she said. I believed her. That afternoon, Grace took me to lunch at a quiet cafe. Over salads and iced tea, she said, "Benjamin told me what happened with your father and sister. I know I'm not your mother, but if you need someone to stand with you," I reached across the table and grabbed her hand. "Thank you." "Truly, but someone else already offered. I told her about Alex." Her eyes glistened. "That's beautiful," she said softly. "Your mother would be proud." That night, I sat down and wrote a letter, not for mailing, but for clarity. I wrote to my father, to Jessica, to the little girl I used to be. I poured out the grief I had swallowed, the apologies I never received, the strength I had found anyway. I didn't plan to send it. I just needed to see it in ink. The day before the wedding, the rehearsal dinner took place at a small Italian bistro near the venue. My bridesmaids wore deep green. Thomas's groomsmen made toasts that had us crying with laughter. And then Alex stood. He didn't speak long. "Just this. Danielle is not just a survivor. She's a builder, a truth teller, a woman who stands tall not because life was easy, but because she refused to kneel to injustice. Tomorrow, I'll have the honor of walking her down the aisle, but I want you all to know I'm not stepping in because someone else couldn't. I'm stepping in because she deserves someone who never left." The room fell silent. Then applause. Long, genuine. I met his eyes and nodded. No words were needed. Later that night, I checked Jessica's Instagram. She was live, streaming from her penthouse suite, gushing about Centerpiece's donors' last-minute RSVPs. "Tomorrow's going to be unforgettable," she said with a wink. "A celebration of truth and transparency." I nearly laughed. The irony was thick enough to choke on. I closed the app and turned off my phone. No more noise. No more comparisons. Tomorrow the story would be mine. And this time, the whole world would know the truth. The morning of my wedding, I woke up before the alarm. The sky outside the hotel window was painted in soft pinks and golds, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of stillness. Not peace. Peace would come later, but clarity. My bridesmaids arrived just after 7, bursting with energy and coffee. Makeup, hair, mimosas, it all blurred together like scenes from a dream. But I wasn't distracted. I was preparing, not just to get married, but to reclaim my voice. At 10:00 a.m., I sent an email. The subject line, "Whistleblower Evidence, Jessica Crane Foundation." The recipients, 3 investigative reporters, 2 government regulators, and 1 anonymous tip line for nonprofit fraud. Attached was everything: screenshots, transactions, voice memos. I didn't include my name. I didn't have to. Let the facts speak. At noon, Alex arrived. He knocked once and stepped inside the bridal suite, holding a delicate white envelope. "Your vows," he said, smiling. "I figured you might want a fresh copy." I took the envelope and smiled back. "Thank you for everything." He hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket, a small silver key. "This is to a storage unit in Greenpoint. Inside is everything Jessica's foundation tried to bury. If they try to deny what's coming, this backs it up." I didn't ask how he got it. I didn't need to. I tucked the key into my clutch and said, "Let's go get married." The ceremony was held at a rooftop garden overlooking the city skyline. String quartet, white roses. 90 guests seated in silence as I stepped into view. My dress shimmered in the late afternoon light, but all I could see was Alex waiting at the edge of the aisle in a tailored navy suit, pride glowing in his eyes. As we walked, I didn't think about Jessica, or my father, or the years of silence and sabotage. I thought about my mother humming in the kitchen. I thought about the version of me that almost gave up. I thought about the family I had chosen, and I walked, head high, heart open. At the altar, Thomas took my hands. "You're radiant," he whispered. "You're real," I whispered back. The vows we exchanged weren't just about love. They were about resilience, about choosing each other not just when it was easy, but when it felt impossible. When the officiant said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," and we kissed, the applause felt like thunder. It was not just a celebration, it was a declaration. During the cocktail hour, I caught sight of Grace laughing with Alex by the bar. Thomas's father was giving a toast about second chances. The sky turned lavender above us, and then it happened. Just before dinner, a murmur rippled through the crowd, phones buzzed, guests began whispering. I stepped aside and checked mine. The top headline on 3 news sites: "Major charity fraud uncovered at Jessica Crane Foundation." Underneath, a blurry photo of Jessica in her gala dress, mid-speech, mouth open in surprise. The article laid out the details: misappropriated funds, falsified documents, whistleblower tip, federal inquiry pending. I read it once, then again, and then I laughed. Quiet, freeing. I turned to Alex, who had clearly read the same story. "You?" he asked. "You," I corrected. "We," he said, and we clinked glasses. The rest of the evening blurred into a haze of dancing speeches and joy. My father never came. Jessica never called. But I no longer needed them to. I had written my own ending, and the next chapter was mine. The fallout was immediate and brutal. By sunrise the next morning, the Jessica Crane Foundation's website had been taken offline, its once polished homepage replaced by a stark white screen bearing a single message: "Under review." News outlets picked up the story with hungry fervor, each headline more damning than the last. New York socialite implicated in charity fraud. Whistleblower exposes multi-million-dollar scam. Where did the money go? Photos of Jessica smiling at fundraisers, arms draped around celebrities and politicians, were now juxtaposed with records of lavish personal expenses charged to the foundation: designer clothes, international vacations, luxury furniture. The $80,000 kitchen renovation donor funded. The board members tried to distance themselves. Statements were issued. Lawyers were retained. And by Monday morning, Jessica was fired from her own foundation. By Tuesday, the state attorney general's office had opened a formal investigation. My father didn't appear in any of the headlines, but he wasn't spared. The donors he had recruited over the years, his friends, clients, golf buddies, felt betrayed. Calls went unanswered. Meetings were canceled. His phone went silent. That Thursday, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. Just a single sentence: "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The consequences were already in motion. What no one knew not yet was that the evidence Alex and I had shared also uncovered something far darker. Among the documents recovered was a ledger of silent payments off the books cash transfers labeled with initials and cryptic descriptions. It suggested Jessica had been paying off someone inside the Department of Urban Planning to fast-track permits for luxury developments in neighborhoods where her foundation claimed to be building shelters. The very people she claimed to help single mothers survivors of abuse veterans were pawns in her real business scheme. Gentrification under the guise of charity. That was when the FBI stepped in. 2 weeks later, I watched the footage in stunned silence. Jessica, dressed in a beige trench coat and oversized sunglasses, being led out of her Upper East Side apartment in handcuffs. The charges: wire fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The camera zoomed in as she passed a sea of reporters. Jessica. Any comment, Jessica, did you steal from your own charity? Do you regret destroying your sister's wedding day? She said nothing, but her expression said everything. Rage, disbelief, and above all, fear. The socialite who had once ruled every room now looked small, cornered, powerless. A week after her arrest, I received a letter, handwritten, from jail. The return address confirmed it. Danielle, it began. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to explain. I didn't finish reading it. I burned it in my sink. Some things do not deserve answers. My father tried to make amends in small ways. He sent wedding gifts, which I returned. He left voicemails, which I deleted. Eventually, he stopped trying, and I felt nothing but relief. One afternoon, Thomas and I walked through the botanical gardens where we'd once had engagement photos taken. The air smelled of roses and soil, and the sunlight filtered through the trees like gold. "Do you ever miss them?" he asked. I thought about it. About birthday candles never blown out together. Holidays filled with silence, the years of walking on emotional eggshells. "No," I said softly. "I miss who I thought they were, but not who they actually are." Jessica was eventually sentenced to 5 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole in 3. She lost her apartment, her foundation, and her reputation. My father retired quietly. The firm nudged him out with a severance package and a vague announcement about spending more time with family. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. They had spent years controlling the narrative, making me feel small, unstable, unworthy. But in the end, their own actions spoke louder than anything I could have said. The world saw who they truly were, and for the first time, I was free. After the storm settled and the media moved on, I was left with something I hadn't expected: stillness. Not emptiness, not despair, just quiet. For the first time in my adult life, I was no longer orbiting around other people's needs, lies, or expectations. I was no longer the daughter trying to earn love or the sister fending off sabotage. I was just Danielle, and that was enough. Therapy helped. I began seeing a trauma-informed counselor who specialized in family abuse dynamics. The sessions were not easy. We unpacked everything from the subtle emotional neglect of my childhood to the gaslighting I endured during my engagement. We confronted the way I had internalized blame, how I had been conditioned to think my pain was excessive, my reactions overblown. "You were not too sensitive," my therapist told me one afternoon. "You were just deeply unprotected." That line stayed with me. It became the lens through which I reevaluated every memory. And with each realization, I felt a piece of my worth return. I also leaned into my career with renewed energy. The same marketing instincts that helped me expose Jessica were now being poured into my own firm, which I launched 6 months after the wedding. It was a boutique agency focused on nonprofit storytelling, helping small, honest charities craft campaigns that actually honored the people they served. I named it True North Strategies, a tribute to what I had found within myself. Business grew fast, word of mouth spread. Clients praised the empathy I brought to their messaging. "You get it," one director told me after a meeting. "You understand what it means to fight for something real." I smiled. I've lived it. Thomas remained my anchor. He never once made me feel like my trauma was too heavy or my healing too slow. He met every tear, every late-night doubt, every celebratory milestone with steady love. On our first anniversary, he surprised me with a framed photo of the two of us walking down the street in Florence. Me laughing, head thrown back, completely unaware he was taking the picture. "This is how I see you," he said. "Free," I cried. But this time, they were tears of joy. I also redefined family. Jack became a permanent presence in our lives. Thanksgivings, birthdays, even lazy Sundays spent gardening or reading together in the park. One evening over dinner, he said, "You know, I always wanted a daughter. I just didn't know she'd find me in her 30s." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You found me when I needed you most. That's what counts." And then there were the letters. Every few weeks, I'd receive a card in the mail from women who had seen my story online. Survivors, daughters, brides. Some shared their own battles with toxic siblings, others thanked me for giving them the courage to cut ties or speak up. One woman wrote, "I was going to invite my abusive father to my wedding out of obligation. After watching your story, I chose peace instead. Thank you for showing me that I didn't need to justify my worth." I kept every letter in a wooden box Thomas made for me, a reminder that the truth once spoken doesn't just free you, it frees others too. The final piece of my healing came one spring afternoon, walking alone through the neighborhood where I grew up. I passed the bakery where Mom used to buy lemon scones, the library where I hid in books during hard days, and finally the house. The windows were dark, the yard overgrown, a for sale sign tilted in the front lawn. I stood at the gate, remembering the girl who once lived inside, quiet, careful, constantly measuring her worth against impossible standards. "You're safe now," I whispered aloud. "You made it out." Then I turned and walked away, heart lighter, future wide open. What happened with my father and sister wasn't just family drama. It was a generational sickness, a cycle of control, manipulation, and misplaced loyalty that had poisoned more than one life. And I broke it. Not with rage or revenge, but with truth, boundaries, and love given only where it was deserved. That's what I want every woman watching this to understand, especially the ones over 50 who've been made to feel like it's too late to change the narrative, to stand up to protect the younger version of themselves that no one ever protected. It's not too late. It's never too late to choose yourself. My father eventually asked to see me again. He'd moved to a smaller apartment, cut ties with Jessica, and was attending therapy. But I told him the truth. I forgave him, but I didn't forget. And I wouldn't allow him to re-enter my life until he showed me, not just told me, that he had changed. Healing is not a hallway with a single door. It's a staircase, and some people stay on the ground floor while you rise. I rose. I chose to build a life with people who don't ask me to shrink. I chose love that doesn't hurt. I chose peace over performance. That's how the cycle ends. And I didn't just end it for me. I ended it for the daughter I hope to have one day. When she asks me, "Mom, what does love look like?" I'll say, it looks like someone who shows up, someone who listens, someone who never lets another person's voice drown out your own. She won't have to unlearn a lifetime of being diminished because I did that work for her. And maybe you're not a mother. Maybe your damage didn't come from a sibling or a parent, but from a partner, a boss, a so-called friend. Maybe you're still in the fog wondering if what you feel is real, if your hurt matters. Let me say this clearly, it does. Your pain is valid. Your story deserves air. And your freedom begins the moment you stop explaining it to people who benefit from your silence. Speak anyway. Tell your story. Even if your voice shakes. Even if no one believes you at first. Even if it costs you the comfort of people who never loved you right. Because on the other side of that fear is something unshakable, clarity, strength, and a tribe that chooses you not for what you can give or endure, but for who you are. This is more than just a wedding story. It's a blueprint for reclaiming power after betrayal, for creating a new kind of family, for reminding women, especially those who've spent decades sacrificing for others, that your second act can be your strongest yet. I look at the life I have now, and I don't feel regret. I feel reborn. I feel proud of the woman I fought to become. And if you're watching this, wondering if you have that kind of strength, trust me, you do. You always have. Now go use it. Choose yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. If it spoke to you, share it. Let's break these cycles together, one truth at a time.